Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm going to do a more restrained presentation this week because next week it will be a combination of eclipse coming up the 29th, the Saturn Rahu conjunction starting shortly thereafter, and also New Year. So it's going to be a kind of an action-packed week next week. So I want to do somewhat more of an immediate future chart for you for this week, and give you a break. There will be a lot of things happening though in uh, next week, and also I just want to let you know that I did have I'm going to be interviewed tomorrow by John Karazian on Germany Astrology. That will be available for you to view. And I also have another um, recording done by Suraj Dubaj, which will be coming out shortly. And that will also be touching on certain aspects of Germany astrology, just to um, give an introduction of what's involved in analyzing a chart and also how you can use it in your life. So I think you'll find those views very interesting. I'll also be posting shortly a an interview that I did with John Karazian on this particular website. He did it for his own broadcast, but I'm also planning on putting that up over the next few days. So there will be a lot of content coming out, but I intend to keep this week a little bit lighter with like small glimpses towards the future. Okay, so let's um, go on with it. Let's get on with it. If you want to contact me for lessons or for readings, please call me please text or call me at 508-525-0001. Again, that's 508-525-0001. All right. And you can also email me at GaryGomesG@gmail.com. Again, that's GaryGomesG@gmail.com. So let's talk about what's happening astrologically in the sky right now. Uh, and one of the reasons I, I want to take a more conservative view is because Mercury is really wreaking havoc right now uh, in the sky. So let's look at that because we're getting all kinds of what I would call miscommunications from Mercury, and all kinds of what I would call lies or made up stories coming out from Mercury. And so I've thrown the chart up on the screen. You can see it right now. And the moon is we have a Cancer rising sign, Mars in the 12th house, Moon and K2 are in the third house. K2 is direct. Rahu, Venus, Mercury, and for those of you who use it, Neptune and Sun are in the ninth house. Jupiter's in the 11th house, and Mars is in the 12th house. Saturn's in the 8th house in this chart. So if you notice, so the Sun-Saturn conjunction is um, has gone. Sun has moved into the next sign, but Saturn is still combust, is still within, is still very close to the sun, even though it's in a different sign. And combustion essentially um, diminishes the significations of the planets. And Mercury is also combust in this particular chart and also aspected by K2. So we'll discuss that in just 1 second. The positive thing is that Mercury's debilitated, so a lot of the stories that we're hearing are just essentially very disorganized and very confusing and a little bit wild, I think. So we're hearing a lot of stories in the press around the world about how basically how democracy is in danger, how democratic systems are all in danger, et cetera, et cetera. And they're not necessarily fake news, but they're pressing the panic button because all of these planets are really close to Rahu and Ketu, okay? And that creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of worry. Uh, Mercury and Moon in opposition essentially means you're going to have a confusion between practical reality and um, less Moon and essentially made up scenarios. So I think what, and you'll also have confusion over which direction leaders are moving in. There's so if you depending on which news source you tune into, you'll either get um, a lot of panic about economic conditions, or you'll get a lot of optimism about economic conditions. You'll get a lot of panic about free speech being taken away, or you'll get a lot of optimism about justice being done. And all of these stories are essentially um, trying to think of the right word to use. They're narratives being woven by certain people in order to further political agendas and even financial agendas. Mars is aspecting the moon, so people are in a fighting mode. Jupiter is aspecting the moon, so people want justice or maybe even um, financial growth. Venus and Mercury, so the moon is really under, so Venus and Mercury and Sun are aspecting the moon. It's a full moon today. So a lot of these things are really quite so this is not surprising. We just came out of an eclipse. The full moon is just like what I would call eclipse backwash. And Rahu essentially is responsible for full moon or blood moon eclipses. And Rahu is causing a lot of panic and a lot of um, deceit, basically. So this Sun Rahu conjunction indicates governments are dissatisfied. They're trying to arc or present new conditions. And I don't like Saturn in the eighth house from the rising sign when because that to me indicates attacks to structures, but it can also alternately indicate the willingness to tear down structures to make room for something good. So I'm not talking about revolution. I'm not talking about political violence, just the willingness to pursue new courses of action in order to make reforms. And there's a certain experimental aspect to this combination. Um, some of these things, but retrogrades usually mean we're going back over old scripts. We're not hearing new information. We're hearing repetition of positions that have been taken repeatedly in order to justify certain actions being taken. And I think one of the most interesting things that happened uh, on the day of the eclipse was that the Democrats refused to shut down the government um, in order to um, hand a defeat to the Republicans. And actually, it was something which was, um, but you can also see a, a sort of a power struggle developing in the Democratic Party in the United States over which approach to take to oppose President Trump and the Republicans. And you can also see some Republicans, although only a few, breaking ranks with President Trump over certain policies. And you can also see a reversion um, on certain parties that were expected to go along, like Russia uh, and Ukraine and um, Europe is essentially pushing back and saying, well, we're not sure we want this. I think Europe is really um, living in a false reality right now, if I can put it bluntly, because they're expecting the war effort in Ukraine to continue, but they don't have really any alternative um, to offer. They just want to see the war keep on going, it looks like. And that's not a viable solution. Um, Russia has also presented some obstacles to the peace process, definitely. And so we'll have to wait and see, really, I say for about a month and a half until these planetary transits straighten themselves out before we see any real progress in a peace deal. I hope I'm wrong about that because this war has been going on far too long. It could have been resolved in 2022. It wasn't, and that was at the United States urging that the Ukraine not negotiate. But I think, like I said, with Venus and Mercury both retrograde, um, even though Venus is exalted and Mercury is debilitated, I think what we're seeing is essentially a flip in terms of forward progress being made on things like tariffs and peace deals, because these planets are not sure what they want. They're not sure if they want economic success or if they want to fight um, until there is no other option. Uh, the Saturn is in a trine to Mars. I very rarely use these combinations, but in this case, I think I have to. Saturn's in a trine to Mars, so it will slow down the process. Saturn also buffets. But I think there is some room for optimism because Jupiter is over here in this sign. It rules um, Venus, Mercury, Sun, and Jupiter's direct, so there will be progress made. But again, I think what you're seeing is a lot of um, holding on, holding on to small differences as a way of prolonging the conflict, which isn't good. Uh, Saturn, you will continue to see more attempts to realign politically around the world. Also, just because of this combination um, in Pisces, excuse me, you'll also see some mistakes being made in terms of trade, in terms of um, not necessarily nationalism, but in terms of how countries deal with each other. You know, some countries will dig their heels in, and that'll become a little bit more obvious in April when Saturn is in the same sign with Venus. But I think you will see a resolution within 2 months of a lot of these issues. And so let's see now. But I have seen a lot of coverage about um, fear that uh, the current president is going after political enemies. That's one thing that I'm seeing a lot of coverage on, and also that he's claiming powers that aren't his. And I'm no expert in constitutional law. I don't pretend to be, but there are ways he can still do layoffs without executive orders. And it may take an act of Congress to do it, but he can still do it. And also, I think that if the Justice Department has been compromised, and this is a big if the Justice Department has been compromised, then there should be some kind of redress or some kind of access to try to correct that situation. So um, it can't be used as a political weapon. I'm not saying it has been. I'm just saying uh, this will actually not only benefit the current administration, it will benefit future administrations. So I think that a lot of things that people are worried about are essentially um, because of the Venus and Mercury um, retrogrades, essentially regurgitations of past positions. And as soon as these two planets go direct, you'll start to see sort of a fallback from those particular positions. The other thing is um, the so let's talk in terms of like real terms. In terms of the world, we do have a sun, we have a full moon. Now, this can lead to more sea disasters, uh, more travel problems, more delays and readjustments of schedules, more miscommunications. So just remember to exercise caution, especially when you're traveling. It doesn't mean you can't travel at all. It just means it's a little bit dangerous, especially with Mars aspecting K2. Um, Mars in about 2 to 3 weeks will essentially traverse into Cancer. It should calm down people just a little bit. Um, Saturn will transition into um, Pisces, which should make um, liberals or leftists more inclined to engage in violent acts or engage in demonstrations. It may not necessarily be violent acts. It may be more demonstrations. And also, I think you'll start to see some unraveling of the misunderstandings about uh, economic policies, which are currently being implemented across the world. So we'll start to get a clearer idea of what's going on. But again, I do want to prepare you for the fact that there will be a lot of um, disruption between the end of March and the end of April, mainly in terms of fear or in terms of um, animosity, and also fear that proposed changes will disrupt the existing order. I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of countries instituting um, some form of free speech uh, restrictions, including the United States, and also, but primarily in Europe. So that seems to be the trend right now because the sun is in a sign with Rahu, it'll panic a little bit. And the sun is essentially government, and they won't want to lose control. So, um, in more repressive regimes, I would expect to see some military or some governmental crackdowns. In less repressive countries, more restrictions on free speech. I hope that doesn't come to pass, and I hope that this will actually cause a break in that particular pattern. But experience tends to make me err on the side of pessimism for this. It won't necessarily harm trade. It won't necessarily harm uh, anybody. But again, we are going to see shifts in power, very dramatic shifts in power over the next couple of months. And not necessarily in the United States, but in other countries in the world. And so, and I include in that the Far East, I include in that China, Vietnam, Australia, New Zealand, uh, a bunch of countries around the world, a whole slew of countries around the world. So again, April looks like it's going to be a pretty interesting month. I'll get into the New Year's forecast and the eclipse forecast next week. Um, but it looks like an interesting period in time. This is necessary, I think, in terms of the chart because a lot of the current systems have been so used to um, getting their own way for a prolonged period of time, roughly 70 years, that they don't see any real need to change. They don't see any real need to listen to uh, the population or listen to um, people around the world. And that will cause some very strong resentment. Okay. So I don't know if you heard it here first, but I think we are going to see some rather, um, depending on the country, some rather aggressive actions or some rather restrictive actions, both from the people and the government. Uh, the other, again, I'm encouraging you not to worry because the foundation to me looks solid, but it'll look a little shaky in mid-April. The other thing I want to point out was the Moon K2 conjunction. A lot of people are going to feel a little bit depressed or a little bit down over the next day or so, and that'll disappear by Monday. The moon will be in Libra on Monday. Everybody will be a little bit fair-minded, less forgetful, less depressed, less antagonistic, and a little bit more, but happier. Although Venus is a little bit greedy uh, with this particular combination. Also, people should expect increased signs of kidney problems um, or liver problems, not liver problems, that's Jupiter, kidney problems or even problems with digestion over the next couple of days just because of this Moon Ketu conjunction that occurred, and also because of Venus and Mercury being retrograde. There'll be a lot of false alarms too in that area, so just be aware that it's not necessarily bad. All right, so let's move on to uh, the individual signs. And um, so we have, um, yeah, and I like the Navamsha chart for this reading because Venus is in the third house. So that's good for negotiations. But again, like I said, it's just there'll be a lot of the same old for the next couple of months. So you'll see people returning to old scripts instead of moving forward, which is a bit sad, but it's inevitable to a certain extent. And again, a lot of lying in political circles, Mars Mercury aspect. All right, so let's look at the actual sun, rising, moon signs. So if your sun or your moon or your rising sign is in Aries, you can expect good financial opportunities, good savings opportunities, but geez, just try to be careful about spending too much money. Um, you'll have more aggressive energy this month, and that can cause some problems with the public. So just remember to be polite to people. Can cause some problems with family as well. Saturn's in the 11th house, so good for gains, but through slow effort. A lot of those gains are going to be spent on children, on siblings, and also on spouse. Okay, so again, just be prepared for those three individuals in your life not being happy with what they have. Jupiter sits in Taurus, so Taurus is May 15th to June 15th, and basically, um, this sign is rather good. It'll give some temporary gains because of this cluster in the 11th house. And Mars in the second house can give some gains to real estate or through property management. Uh, Moon and Ketu in the fifth house, children will seem a little bit depressed or down. That won't last very long, but they'll also seem a little bit difficult to communicate with. For seventh house Lord is in the second house, so there will be fights with relationship partners this week, and Saturn's in the 10th house. A lot of focus on work life for Taurus. For Gemini's June 15th to July 15th. Mars is in the first house. Again, we have this is a potentially volatile time for this sign. There can be some expenses connected with this sign, especially for things like taxes or else um, allegations of wrongdoing. They will be lies, but they will be still be something that will have to be dealt with. Mars aspects the fourth house in this chart. Mars aspects the moon. So you have to be careful about family life and also about misunderstandings with family members, especially mom. Um, Mars aspects the seventh house, some disruption in relationships. Saturn is in the ninth. Saturn in the ninth house is a little bit difficult for people because they have to work harder in order to make the same money. And but house is not bad for financial gains, and it gives new leadership uh, possibilities to this particular sign. For Cancer, Cancer's Lord is the moon. It sits in the third house. It will make the sign more courageous than usual, more willing to take chances. Mars sits in the 12th house. This is also another combination for arguments with spouse or relationship partners. And, and essentially, you have Mars aspects the seventh house, Mars aspects the third house. So most of cancers will be a little bit more aggressive than normal. Um, Saturn's in the eighth house. We've already spoken about this earlier, but again, this is the end of a restructuring of this person's life and lifestyle, and they'll enter a new lifestyle, but it'll be a bit disruptive, especially career-wise over the next couple of months. We have Mercury, Venus, and Sun, and Rahu in the 10th house. So this will give some fame, but also some scandal connected with career. Jupiter's in the 12th house, and this is actually good for financial gains and prominence abroad. For Jupiter's in the 11th house, excuse me, Mars is in the 12th house. So again, this will give special honors or special awards. My apologies for that. Mars in the 12th, more interest in sexual activity, more interest in, but again, a lot of fighting, a lot more fighting than normal with relationship partners. For Leo, Leo has no planets in it, but it has Moon and Ketu in the second house. This is a good time for fame for this sign, and the Lord of this sign is in the eighth house, so we'll be there for the next few weeks. Um, that does give some fame or some um, reputation to the sign in terms of, but the sign will be also misunderstood and conspired against over the next month or so. And there will try to be a reversal of fortunes for this sign, which has been doing pretty well over the past few weeks. Um, Moon and Ketu sit in the second house. Again, some anxiety or some worry about not being able to get things done in a timely fashion. Let's see now. Saturn's in the seventh house, so this gives some solidity or some stability towards partnerships that will last for another couple of weeks. And let's see now. The Moon K2 conjunction in the second house, we already spoken about that. In the 10th house, so pretty much anything the sign does, even if it's met with a lot of opposition, will essentially go through unscathed. And Mars aspects the moon as well. And I think from this particular combination, you'll hear a lot of angry speech from this particular sign. For Virgo, Virgo has Moon K2 in the first house, can give sudden losses or unexpected income problems. Um, and Rahu, Venus, and Mercury in the seventh house, unexpected relationship opportunities, although I would wait for a couple of months before I acted on any of those. Excuse me, Saturn sits in the sixth house. This is a good placement. It does give the sign a lot of work ethic. Jupiter's in the 10th house, in the ninth house, excuse me. Should give new work opportunities over the next couple of weeks. Mars is in the 10th house. Some arguments or fights at work, and the Moon K2 conjunction in the first house, right now at least, will make this sign a little bit disappointed. But again, that won't last long. For Libra, Libra has no planets in the first house. It does have Venus as its lord in the sixth house, so there's a great deal of willingness to work on the part of the sign. This is not a bad combination. But again, you will find yourself having to redo tasks you thought were done. And also repeat yourself a great deal in order to get things done. Okay. Sun Rahu conjunction. So some things will be coming up and people will tell you you haven't told them about. them about it, and you actually have. Rahu is, again, in the sixth house. This is good for moving forward with ambitions or goals. Saturn's in the fifth house. Overall, a lucky combination for this sign if it's willing to work. Sri Lagna is in the third house, a strong desire for financial growth. Jupiter's in the eighth house. This can indicate wife or relationship partner will be more willing to compromise or more willing to work with you over the next um, few weeks or so. And Mars in the ninth house indicates courage or gain through properties. 10th house Lord is the moon is placed in the 12th house, so this sign will feel a little bit lonely for a couple of days, at least in terms of career, and maybe even a little bit blocked, but that will pass relatively quickly. It'll pass by tomorrow. Let's see now. So Libra looks okay. Scorpio has, again, except for that repetition of work, Scorpio has no plans in the first house. Its first house Lord is in the eighth house. Jupiter's in the seventh house. So that does mean good relationships with wife or relationship partners, but also arguments from time to time. And second house Lord is Jupiter is placed in the seventh house. So again, financial gains from wife or relationship partner, gains from property, unexpected gains from property. Um, Saturn's in the fourth house. So again, a lot of restrictions on what you can and can't do. That will be lifted a little bit over the next couple of months, but there will be fights about it. And Jupiter's in the seventh house. We already spoken about that. So financial gains to spouse. Mars in the eighth can give unexpected problems with real estate or land or even home. And moves in the 11th house with K2. Again, as I've said repeatedly, um, this placement reflects a lot of financial gains these individuals have had, but there'll also be some contestation over the financial gains. So people may want to look at their roles. They may want to look at their their portfolios or their investments to make sure they're getting the best deals they can. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the sixth house. So again, there's a willingness to work or reform here. Mars is in the seventh house. A lot of countries are going to be, a lot of people are going to be upset with this sign because it's making them work or think. Saturn's in the third house, good for financial growth, good for economic gain. And finally, we have Rahu, Venus, Mercury, and Sun in the fourth house, and that indicates a lot of confusion about education and development. The let me just see now. So we're up to Sagittarius. Capricorn has Saturn in the second house. That's the second lord in the second house. That's good for accumulation of money and accumulation of control. Rahu, Venus, and Mercury are in the third house, along with Sun. Those are a combination of malefic and benefic planets. So the Venus-Mercury conjunction is not too promising, but the Rahu-Sun combination is very good. And I think what you'll see is people who focus on what they want and what they desire rather than how to communicate it will succeed. And people who try to tell lies about what they want or what they are after will fail. Let's see now. Jupiter's in the fifth house, so this is overall good for investments, good for the markets. Mars is, and good for people involved in the markets. Mars is in the sixth house in this chart, so it makes this chart kind of aggressive. Um, and systematic in the way it deals with problems. Moon and K2 are in the ninth house, so this should give us some change in fortunes, unexpected change in fortunes due to wife or relationship partner. And that's about it for the sign. For Aquarius, Aquarius has Saturn in the first house. This is one of the Panch uh, Mahapurushi yogas. There's another Panch Mahapurushi yoga from the moon. So, so essentially, Saturn and Venus are not the strongest planets in the chart. The moon is the strongest if you look down here. But among the stronger planets, and the sun is also strong because it's heading towards exaltation. But Jupiter and Venus are very strong. Um, and Mars is very strong in this chart. So let's see what this week. Venus is of medium strength, and Saturn is roughly of medium strength. So again, these two planets on their own can't slow down the light pattern of this particular sign all that much. There will be a lot of confusion emanating from its lips, a lot of trying to dance around the issue in order to make everybody happy. But again, sort of a reversion to old ways of thinking, unfortunately, and old ways of speaking. Jupiter's in the fourth house in this chart, and this is for Aquarius, and that's from February 15th to March 15th. And Mars sits in the fifth house, so this will give arguments or problems with solitary children. Jupiter in the third house, again, there's Jupiter's in the fourth house, excuse me, and this will give educational opportunities to this sign. Moon and K2 are in the eighth house. This gives some financial growth to the sign, but also um, also we're looking at, so we're still looking at Aquarius. I lost my train of thought for a second. So we're looking at the moon. Interest in occult or psychic manifestations. Mars aspects moon. These may come suddenly. Aquarius should be very careful driving. Um, and I was talking about Aquarius' speech. It'll be good for chastising children, but not much else. Um, Pisces is has Venus, Mercury, and Sun in it, as well as Rahu. And Pisces has undergone a lot of scandals or a lot of disruptions over the past year. There's apparently a lot of investigation going into the Gene Hackman case. And also, although I promised to cover it, I never did cover the allegations against P. Diddy, but I will. But the Sun, Venus, Mercury, Rahu conjunction, I think, does tend to mean we'll hear more scandals coming out from politicians and from celebrities and from media figures over the next couple of months. They'll be more aggressive about defending themselves than normal just because of Mars in the fourth house, but those allegations will come out nonetheless. Jupiter aspects the seventh house. A lot of good opportunities to meet new and interesting people for this sign. Mars aspects Moon K2. This sign will have a lot of energy. And finally, Saturn in the 12th. A lot of temptation to spend money on things you really don't need. And that shows up again. Finally, let's go to the star map or the map of the time-space change. And I hope I didn't miss anybody. Let's see now. Let me see now. Excuse me, I'm sorry. It's been kind of a long day for me already. This is the fourth video I've been taping today, so just to explain why I'm a little bit noggy. Outer space change. All right. So at least from the chart, we should expect to hear some scandal um, or some um, miscommunication from Alaska and um, increased government control in the Hawaiian Islands and Alaska. There's a Jupiter line running right through California. I think that's interesting because California, and also close to Oregon and Washington. California had a series of fires, as you know, and um, basically a lot of it was because of a combination of human error and government screw-ups. And I think when you see this Jupiter line coming through like this, it, it sort of indicates um, some kind of a public reckoning as to what happened in California. Um, there's a Mars line running through central Canada, intersecting with a Saturn line, so we can expect some problems in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and also Michigan. Some problems with the government in particular, and all the way down through Louisiana and Mississippi. Um, there's a Saturn Sun line, so those states will become more heavily controlled. But I also think it'll affect states like Indiana, Ohio, as well. Um, there's a Mercury retrograde line running through Virginia and also North and South Carolina and New York and part of Pennsylvania and New York State. And along with the Venus line, we can expect to see more um, difficult rainfalls, especially in Michigan, all the way down to Florida. And I would think, uh, and let me just see now, this Mercury line is running over Florida, Cuba, Panama, and Peru and Ecuador. So we can expect some heavy rainfall in those regions and also some bad communications. Maybe some destructive activity in South Carolina. There's a moon line running through eastern Canada, through Venezuela, through Brazil, and Argentina. So again, I would expect some kind of major storms hitting that part of the world. Let's see now. There's a Jupiter line running through Iceland, the west coast of Africa, and I think the Jupiter line will actually indicate some more attention to the government structures in those parts of the world. We also have a Saturn line running through Ireland, which can give some economic shocks to the system, to that particular country. And we also have a Sun and a Saturn line running through England and France. And that to me indicates more government restrictions, more government um, censorship. The This line runs all the way through Western Africa, down near Gabon, and you also see a Venus Saturn Rahu line running it through Libya and close to Algeria and into Italy and Eastern Europe. And that to me indicates more government scandals. There's a Mars line running straight through Egypt all the way down to South Africa. So this could indicate violence in this part of the world. And there's a moon line in Turkey and into Ukraine and into Russia. And I think that indicates heavy flooding in that part of the world. As we get to there's not a lot of activity happening in Iran, um, but there is a moon line happening close to Israel. And I think that does indicate some violence in Israel as well. As we go over to Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, there's not a lot happening there, thankfully. Although there is a Jupiter line going through India, so this could indicate some problems with government and courts, especially in the Bengali region and also in Bangladesh and Ladakh. Um, there's a sun line running through next to Myanmar and Sun Saturn line running through those regions. And so we can expect to see more repressive government policies. And there's a Venus Mercury retrograde line running through Thailand, Southeast Asia, Cambodia, and down into Malaysia, and I think even into Indonesia. And this part of the world looks like it'll be a little bit troubled in terms of trade and in terms uh, of government overreach. There's a Moon K2 line running through China, some problems with China being misrepresentative and a little bit deceitful. And there's also a Mars line. So there can be some kind of natural disaster happening in New Guinea. Western Australia isn't really hit that valley, but again, some potential for flooding. And there's a Mars line going up over Japan. So again, and the Philippines. So again, some potential for violence in those countries. Finally, we have a Jupiter line running through New Zealand and a Saturn line. So this could mean, at least to me, increased government control, but also increased attention to um, corruption in the New Zealand government. So that's it for this week. I think it's a little shorter than normal, but I think we both deserve it this week. And I'll see you next week. As always, I love you all. I enjoy making these broadcasts. There'll be a lot more next week. And thank you all for watching. And go out and make today the best day, and make today and set up your life so you can realize your goals and your dreams. Okay? All right. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share if you would be so kind. And comments are always welcome, and questions are always welcome. Thanks a lot, folks, and have a great week. Goodbye, everyone. I look forward to next week. And you should watch, look out for those new videos that I will be posting shortly. Okay? Bye, everyone. And thanks again. I love you all, and I wish you all the best.